Good. Way too serious.
Calling this meeting to order. This is the Wakefield School District meeting for 2015. My name is Rick Sager. I'm the moderator tonight. I understood we were going to have a young gentleman here to do the pledge, but apparently has not shown, so I'm going to lead the pledge. So if you'd all please rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. In lieu of the invocation, which I have done on some occasions, I'm going to quote three short inspirational sports quotes in light of the remarkable season of the Canadian people. And you have to guess who said this. First one, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. Vince Lombardi. There may be people that have more talent than you, but there's no excuse for anyone to work harder than you do. Any guess? Recently retired? Derek Jeter. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Come on. Yes, thank you. All right. What?
Shots of what?
Oh, that's good, Ralph. That's good. All right, let's get started. Voting cards. If you're a voter, you should have a voting card and one of these tear-up ballot sheets. If you don't, go sign up, get it. We don't have any wireless mics tonight, so just speak loudly if you wish to speak. Let's see. Thank you, checklist supervisors. Yay. Front table introductions. I'm going to ask that the front table introduce themselves and go on down the line. I'm going to start with you, Connie. So go ahead and state your name and who you are, like budget committee member, etc.
Bruce Rich, Budget Committee.
Dave Bankus, Budget Committee. Peter Urbana, Budget Committee.
Priscilla Colbath, Budget Committee.
Carleen Stewart, Budget Committee.
Norman Joy, School Board.
Bonnie Sear, School Board.
Bob Willett, School Board.
Al Fogg, School Board.
Barbara Lohman, I'm the attorney for the district.
Michael Tercey, the superintendent.
Nathan Castle, business administrator.
Great, thank you very much. I wish to introduce the school district clerk. Easy for me to say. The school district clerk, Beth Selden. Among her other duties, she compiles the minutes of this meeting when she's not bending my ear. Bearded Wonder Show is Sunday, February 15 at 2 o'clock at the Town Hall Opera House. I'm not growing this because I want to, because it's driving me nuts. So buy your tickets from Ed Morrison or at the door. The proceeds benefit New Hampshire Hospice. I will now go through the rules of order, in particular the Brad Hayes rules of order. Raise your hand when you wish to speak. Stand when recognized. Use the microphone, but we don't have microphones, so forget that. State your name. Direct all questions or comments to the moderator, not to any individual. The person who has the floor is not to be interrupted. Limit your remarks to 5 minutes, or I will for you. No one will be allowed to speak a second time until all wishing to speak have had a chance. No more than one amendment on the floor at any one time. All amendments must be in writing. A motion to reconsider must be made immediately following the subject vote. Any ruling made by the moderator can be overruled by a majority vote of this meeting. Any motion which has been seconded, which will terminate debate, will be voted immediately without debate and must pass by majority vote. I first wish to recognize Philip Twombly, who will make the Bill Twombly motion regarding the hour of adjournment. Phil.
Mr. Moderator, I move that this session of the school district warrant be adjourned by 11 p.m. and that no warrant article be taken up for consideration after 10:50 p.m. In the event that all articles in the warrant have not been acted upon, the moderator is authorized to reconvene this session at a date, time, and place which meets the approval of the majority of the voters present.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Ralph seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Phil. On to the warrant. Article 1 is the election of officers. That will be on the official ballot March 10. Yes.
Point of order.
Yes.
I'd like to know where this meeting was advertised. It's very poor attendance here tonight, and I couldn't find it in any local newspaper.
Beth?
I put it in all the post offices, the schools, website. It was at the SAU, and I had it on the local channel. Is that channel?
It wasn't advertised in the paper.
No, I'm sorry.
Did we require it to be noticed in the paper?
No. Law does not require it. It requires only that the warrant be posted.
Oh, and it was also at town hall.
It's always in the paper.
Excuse me?
Judy says it's always been in the paper, so maybe you can make a note of that. Next year, let's put it in the newspaper. If there's room in budget for that.
It's very poor attendance. That's part of the reason.
Yeah, attendance hasn't been great, for a number of years. This is poorer than usual, but it might be the fact that it's really cold out and Tuesday night instead of a weekend night. I don't know. But your comment is noted. So, election of officers, we're not doing that tonight. Article 2, to see if the Wakefield School District will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Wakefield School Board and the Wakefield Paraprofessionals Union, NAH, which calls for the following increase in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. Estimated increase 2015-16 is $22,616. 2016-17 it's $22,186, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $22,616 for the 2015-16 school year, such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those of the appropriation occurring current staffing levels paid in the prior fiscal school year. School board recommends this 3-1. Budget committee recommends 7-0 and 1. Anybody wish to discuss this article? Seeing no discussion, I will move on to Article 3. Shall the Wakefield School District, if Article 2 is defeated, authorize the school board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 2 costs only? Majority vote required. School board recommends this article 4-0 and 1. Budget committee recommends this article 6-1-1. Any discussion regarding Article 3? All right. Is everybody texting? Okay, well then I'm going to interject something. If I have a quote, and if you can guess who said the quote, and I'll give you some hints because there's not a lot of people here to guess, you get a scratch ticket that Phil Twombly has in his pocket. We're supporting education here one way or another. Here's the quote. The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits. If you think you know the answer, raise your hand so I can call on you. Ralph.
Albert Einstein?
You are correct, sir.
Good for you.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm surprised.
We're all surprised you got that.
Beating my habit, you know.
Yeah, I know.
I was hoping that wasn't going to be a scratch ticket.
Okay, who said this? And then we'll move on to the next article. I have never let my schooling interfere with my education.
Sounds like Mark Twain.
I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. Okay, it's a male American who's
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain, yes. The school district attorney gets it. Yes. Okay. So far,
Too funny.
front table 2, audience
Thank you.
0.
If I win anything, I'll give it to
Okay, Article 4. And by the way, these are scratch tickets. They're bacon scratch tickets, and they smell like bacon. And because we all bring home the bacon and we spend it at this meeting, I thought they were appropriate. They're delicious. Shall the Wakefield School District, Article 4, by the way, shall the Wakefield School District vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget, posted with a warrant, or as amended by the vote of the first session, for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $8,809,032. The school board recommends $9,082,032. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $9,079,670, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Wakefield School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman numeral 10 and 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. And then there's some notes there. I guess I'll go through those because they're somewhat important. The school board's recommended total operating budget will be offset by revenues of $273,000, leaving a net budget amount of $8,809,032. The total default budget will be offset by a similar amount, leaving a net budget of $8,806,670. Barbara, I have a question. Is it required that the moderator read the articles? Because that one was really long. No. Okay.
I think you can assume everybody here knows how to read if you have.
Yes. Okay.
People that
Well, they don't know very many trivia questions. Okay. Anybody want to discuss Article 4? Yes, Howie.
Yeah, I would have, in the past, we have traditionally on Deliberative lowered the public tuition line. And if we look at history, you'll notice that over the last 10 years, a large number of students leave, drop out, whatever. Prior to the passage of the law saying that kids could leave till they're 18, we would take 10 out of the line. We lowered that to 6, I believe it was, when the law passed, because we didn't know the impact. Question, have we done that yet? If not, why not?
It's Priscilla.
Okay, I did the high school numbers for the last 6 years of the school district reports. 2009-10, 22.5 students left. 10-11, 32. 11-12, 9.5. 12-13, 25.9. 13-14, 13.5. So if you average that, Mr. Tursey's been averaging everything by 3 years, you come up with 16 that you eliminate. Even if you take the lowest two numbers, the 9.5 and the 13.5, then you come up with 11 students. Now, the Spalding number this morning was 199, and we budgeted for 204. Next year, the 8th grade, going into Spalding will be 37, plus 5 in Kingswood, 42. And well, the kids going in from 8th grade will be 37. Kids in the senior year are 37, plus 5, which is 42. So I'm going to make a motion to lower that by 10 students, based on information.
Seconded. Do you, okay, so the motion is to lower the bottom line of this article by 10,000, by 10 students? What's the figure that it's going to be lowered by?
$240,000 and 620. 120620.
120620. Okay, and just for clarification, will that amount of your motion reduce all of the figures in Article 4? Like the,
Yes.
Also,
Default, can't reduce the default.
okay.
You know that, yeah.
Right, so it's just going to reduce the 8,809,032
Yeah.
amount by 120,620. And will it also reduce the school board recommended amount of 9,082,032?
Well, if I may.
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Moderator. The school board recommended amount, it's just there to tell the voters that's what the school board recommended, but what they actually vote on is the operating budget.
No, absolutely. I just didn't know if this motion, which I guess that's, oh, that's not the school board over there.
They
Never
vote-
mind. Kidding.
Okay. They vote on the budget committee figure anyway, so I think that's the only figure that gets amended.
Yes. I was harkening back to when Priscilla was on the
Okay.
school board, so I just thought she was wearing a school board hat. So I got it. Okay, fine. Any further discussion regarding this motion? Yes, Mr. Mankus.
Question, I guess, listening to that, it looks like we've lost 6 students so far, maybe 5, and if we deduct the 10, and 4 of them don't drop out, this is a bill that has to be paid to the high schools. My question would be, we're planning ahead on 4 dropping out. If they don't, where do we find the money if they don't drop out?
Jerry?
I think the end of the fiscal year 2014, we had a budget surplus of around $660,000. So, I mean, even if they wind up with a surplus that's only half of that for this next year, we would still have roughly $300,000, potentially $300,000 surplus. So it's always easy to find that amount in there.
Any more discussion? Yes.
Also, to answer your question, Mr. Mankus, is that if we discover that we aren't anticipating that high of a surplus, we would find those additional monies somewhere else in the budget throughout that fiscal year.
I couldn't hear your answer. Can you use the microphone?
I'm sorry. How about now?
Really, you have to really get close right up to it.
If we do not anticipate that high of a surplus, we would be looking for those additional monies within the operating budget.
One more question.
Go ahead, Dave.
What kind of surplus are you anticipating?
I wouldn't know that figure at this point. However, if we're budgeting well, we wouldn't have that high of a surplus. That the number that was stated was high because of some students that did drop out of high school. I should say not drop out, but they actually were not residents of Wakefield any longer and moved to other schools. And we also had some, I believe, some savings in students with disabilities as well that were no longer part of the district.
Okay, yes, Priscilla. And Priscilla, can you talk really loud or grab a mic?
That's why I did a 6-year average with the numbers of 22, 32, 9, 25, and 13. It shows this is a trend. A lot of kids that live in Wakefield, their parents move to Rochester when they graduate from Paul School, and the kids go to Spalding, but we don't have to pay that tuition.
Okay, any further discussion regarding this amendment to Article 4? Seeing no further hands for discussion, all those in favor of this amendment, which is to reduce the amount by $120,620, please indicate by raising your green voting cards. Okay, put them down. All those opposed, raise your green cards. Okay, clearly it passes. So the new amount of, the amended amount to Article 4, as I calculated, is, and somebody check this with me, is $8,688,412. Right, agreement? Okay. So the Article 4 is now amended to that amount. Is there any further discussion regarding Article 4? Yes, Judy Mason.
It's my understanding that in this article, they have added the revenue for Title I funds, and also added it on the budgeted side in the amount of $273,000. This is something that's never been done before. And I guess I'm looking for a better explanation than what I've got in the past as to why we are adding the revenue money into the operating budget. I'm looking at an RSA that says each school administrative unit is hereby directed to establish separate from its operating budget a federal grant account. So I'd like to know why we're doing this.
I'm just going to repeat the comment, the question. Judy is questioning why the $273,000 is being added in to both the proposed operating budget and the default budget when there's an RSA indicating that is not appropriate practice. Is that a good summary so everybody can hear?
Yes, and I'd really like the school board member to answer that question for me, because if they don't understand it, then I don't see how we can understand it.
Okay, well, if I'm not going to force anybody to talk to it. So the question is out there. Does anybody wish to respond to Judy's question?
I can-
Barbara
Nobody else
Lohman,
can.
School District
Okay.
Council.
The budget law, I guess
yeah.
I need the mic. The requirement that you set up a separate federal funds account is for federal grant money that is unanticipated. Money is considered unanticipated if you don't know you will receive money from that source. That's a separate issue from this situation. You know you're going to get Title I and Title II money. Nobody knows exactly what you're going to get, but you put an estimate. RSA 32.5, which is the budget law, requires gross budgeting. What that means is that districts are required to budget the total amount, including amounts offset by federal funds that you know you will receive. The Title I money, Title II money, it's money you know you receive. Wakefield has been doing this incorrectly for a number of years. Nobody is sure why. We don't know why DRA didn't catch it. We don't know why the school district's auditors didn't catch it. The law has been in place for a number of years that requires gross budgeting, and the Department of Revenue Administration is fully aware of this and has routinely advised districts for years that those federal monies, Title I, Title II, special ed money, must be included in the gross operating budget figure, even though you have the revenue to offset it. I believe we caught it, or it was caught this year, because now the Department of Revenue Administration is recommending that all school districts use certain accounting software that they have, and you cannot budget on a net basis with that accounting software. You have to include the federal funds in the gross operating budget figure, and then you show it as an offsetting revenue.
Judy, follow-up question?
I'm looking at 194C6.
194 what?
194C6. It does not say unanticipated or anticipated in it.
I can't hear you, Judy.
My other question would be, aren't we automatically creating a surplus? Because if you're going to budget that money, and then you're going to be reimbursed that money, you still have it, which gives you a surplus. It's a bottom line budget, and you can actually spend that money on something else.
No, it doesn't create a surplus because it's offset by appropriations. 194C6 talks about the SAU budget, not the school district budget, for one thing.
Right, but it also says in it that it's supposed to be accounted for in the same manner.
Those are accounting requirements. The fact remains that RSA 32:5 requires that the budget be done in a certain way. The operating budget is supposed to show revenue from all sources. In fact, I'll read the language to you. RSA 32:5, Roman numeral 3, all appropriations recommended shall be stipulated on a gross basis, showing anticipated revenues from all sources, including grants, gifts, bequests, and bond issues, which shall be shown as offsetting revenues to appropriations affected. Now, I think what has happened is that some people have in the past assumed that you can treat federal funds as unanticipated revenue because you don't know the exact amount you're going to receive. DRA has made it clear for a number of years that that is incorrect. You have to show those as offsetting revenues, and you have to show them as appropriations. So it doesn't mean that you can spend additional money beyond what's required to operate the schools. All they're saying is if you're getting Title I money and Title II money, you have to include what you're spending under those statutes in your appropriations. It doesn't mean you can spend more money than you can otherwise spend.
You'll have a surplus at the end of the year.
Okay, well, we have,
That's the best.
I saw Jerry's hand, I'm going to call on Jerry. Go ahead.
I think Mr. Knight can go first. I thought maybe before I'd like to hear Mr. Knight have to say if that's okay.
It's up to me, Jerry.
Okay, I'll go.
No, that's all right. Go ahead. Howard Knight.
Okay, if you raise and appropriate from 273, you collect the 273. You also get it from the federal government. They don't offset it.
No.
You raise and appropriate.
If you raise and appropriate, that means money from all sources, including money that you receive from the feds. Raise and appropriate is not limited to tax money. It's every penny that the school district receives. It does not increase your budget by that $295,000. It is an offset.
If you raise the 9 million, I'm going to use the numbers in here.
Yeah.
The 9,779, that's what goes on the warrant, that's what goes in the tax calculation. Okay?
That's not correct. Before the Department of Revenue Administration sets the tax rate,
Offset.
it offsets any revenue that you receive. So what the tax rate will cover will be the net, but you still have to raise and appropriate the full amount. It's just a rule. You have to do it that way.
Okay, now you're ready, Jerry?
I think I'm ready now.
Okay,
Can I
go
take-
ahead.
Can I take a whack at this?
You can.
Okay, Okay.
but talk loud so that even the lowly supervisors out in Siberia can hear you.
Did you hear me, Supervisor Wynn? I can use a microphone.
Yeah, would somebody grab him a microphone, just,
Didn't bring us the wireless microphones. Okay,
the budget committee didn't approve him in the budget.
sorry. We were presented a budget, and we were told that it takes $8,809,031.07 to operate the school district for the year, and that was what we thought the operating budget was going to be. And then late in the game, we were told that we had to add $273,000 more onto that because there was some federal money coming in, some federal funds. And they tried to explain it to us the same way that you did, because there was some law that we had these anticipated funds coming in and we had to add that to our operating budget, which money coming in doesn't strike me as being an expense for some reason or another. And I didn't quite understand it, but I was listening to watching a school board meeting the other night, the 21st. Mr. Tercey said that we don't get a lump chunk of money in of $273,000. What he said we do is we front this money out of our budget, and what we do at the end of the month is we tell the state what we spent the money on, and they reimburse us for the money at the end of the month. So it's like $270,000, so I figured we're getting back about $30,000 a month from the federal government. So what you're doing is you're adding it on to the $8.8 million that we're already spending, and we're getting the money back anyway. But if you were to take the $8.8 million that we're taking to operate the school, and you were to deduct the $273,000 of reimbursing funds we're getting back, then the amount that we would actually have to raise and appropriate from the taxpayers to run the school should be $8.5 million. It should take $8,536,000 to run the school, because we're getting back in federal grant money $273,000. So what we should be able to do is raise and appropriate the $8,809,000 in this warrant article to operate the school on, and then we get the $273,000 back in grant money, and then our net result is it costs us $8.5 million to run the school. But the way that you have it worded, and the way that you are instructing us to word this, what you're doing is you're spending the $8.8 million, and then you're getting the grant money back, and you're spending the $273,000 again, and you're creating the $273,000 that Mrs. Nation is talking about for having a surplus. And it's like going into a grocery store and buying $150 worth of groceries and getting a $50 coupon at the end, and they're asking you to write out a $50 check for the coupon.
No, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. Let me explain it this way. Let's say you need $1 million to run your schools, all right? That's what it's going to cost, taking into account every penny from every source. It costs $1 million to run the school. The federal government is going to give you $300,000. So out of that $1 million, you only need to raise through taxation at the local level $700,000. You still need a $1 million budget, because it's going to cost $1 million to run the schools. That's what you're going to pay out. You're going to get back $300,000 of that. But you still have to raise and appropriate the whole $1 million, all right? What has created the confusion before is that the school district has been appropriating in the warrant article. The warrant article has said the $700,000. The school district has been spending that additional $300,000 in federal funds, but it was not included as part of the operating budget. And that is what the Department of Revenue Administration is correctly telling us is a violation of the municipal budget law. You need to include in your operating budget all the money that you're spending. So that's, I think that's where the confusion comes in. It does not mean you're spending this year because we've included the amount in the warrant article. It does not mean that the school board is spending $300,000 more than it would have spent otherwise. It simply means now every penny is accounted for that the school board will be spending, as it should be.
Okay, well, okay, so
Hold on one second, Jerry. I'm gonna, Howie had his hand up, so.
Yeah, maybe it'll help if I explain the tax setting process that happens in October, because that's where the credit comes in.
Keep your voice up, Howie, we got people in Siberia back there.
All right. Okay, so in October, hopefully October, when we set the tax rate, the tax rate is set by the select, they will bring in the approved amount of the gross budget, okay, 9 point whatever it was. I'll use your example, Robert, $1 million, okay? The next line under that, DRA will take out the 300,000. So in essence, we are not levying, not being taxed on the full amount. It just dawned on me that having gone through that tax process before. So we're not, it does not create a surplus because they take it out before they set the tax rate.
Thank you, Howie.
That's a good explanation.
Well, I saw Judy's before I saw your Priscilla, so, Judy, go ahead.
Unless they were to spend that before the end of the year.
Unless they were to spend that before the end of the year, was Judy's
It may not
comment.
be there to turn back.
It may not
Well,
be
it
there
will
to
be
turn
turned
back.
in the tax setting process.
Priscilla,
Why doesn't any other district write their warrant articles like this?
They all. I have to tell you, my firm represents about 100 districts, and I was shocked to find out that you were doing it the way you were. I can tell you that at least in the southern half of the state, where most of the districts, or many of the districts we represent are, they are using gross budgeting, as are many districts up in this area. I mean, those aren't the only ones. I know there are some districts that are still doing this wrong. I was amazed to find out that there were. But all I can tell you, as your lawyer, is that it's a violation of the budget law not to have those federal funds included in the operating budget approved by the voters. And now that DRA has figured out that that's what y'all have been doing, there will be a problem. There would be a problem. If you take that $300,000 out this year, when you approve the operating budget, DRA is not going to put it back in and say, oh, well, it's okay, you can go spend that extra $300,000 that you've been spending every year.
go ahead, Priscilla.
At least one district that your firm represents is writing it like we've always written it. And I mean, they have been our attorneys for some time, and
Jerry.
DRA doesn't really seem to do very much at all. They let a lot of things slide, but we'll get into them on a different article. So I was looking at the $8,809,000 grand total of the budget, and then you want to add the $273,000 into that to make the gross budget. Is there any particular line that 200?
That's not correct.
You said that was the gross budget, the 9.1 is the gross budget.
The gross budget is the figure recommended by the Budget Committee, which is $8,809,032. That includes the federal funds that we're talking about. That's the whole point of gross budgeting. The figure approved by the voters has to reflect not just what you're going to raise by taxation, but revenue from all sources. So the 809,032, which is now, I guess, perhaps going to be amended, or has been amended, that includes this $295,000 in federal funds as an offset.
What does the $9.1 million figure
That also-
represent? Is that the gross budget figure, or is that the net budget figure?
No, that's the school board's gross budget figure that the school board recommended.
We thought that the school board recommended the $8.8 million figure because that was in the packet that the school board presented to us as their itemized line-by-line budget. That's what they gave us.
Figured it out, you're doing
they're actually both school board figures, I guess. One is their pre-December 5th figure, and one is their post-December 5th figure. So they're kind of having a conflict with themselves because the budget committee didn't create either one of these budgets.
Yes, Mr. Trucy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Where the $273,000 was not included was in the budget worksheet when we were starting the budget cycle. I can explain how the process went along so people here understand that. We started the budget cycle as we've always done the budget cycle here, and that's by presenting a budget worksheet, going through line by line with the school board as well with the budget committee. And it did not include the line for a fund transfer for federal funds, which would be that $273,000. It came to our attention when we drafted the warrant that included the language as well as the amount that we were not gross budgeting and including that $273,000. And that's when the warrant with the amount of having the additional $273,000 was presented, because we caught that and once it was discovered, we brought it forward as a warrant without adjusting the budget worksheet, because that's what was already presented. And then we had that number and we discussed it at the board level, we discussed it at the budget committee, and we did have an opportunity, if that opportunity was to come about, to amend the budget worksheet. However, we did not get that opportunity to do that, but it doesn't change the number that's in the actual article. The number that's in the article has to match the MS-27, and everybody here has a copy of the MS-27, and if you go to page 7 of 7 on the MS-27, you'll see what the estimated tax will include, and the only difference between the budget committee's recommendation and the school board's recommendation is of $150,000, because that difference is the parking lot warrant. So that was the process that came into play, and when we do this again next year, your budget cycle will begin with a budget worksheet that will include those federal funds. However, we did try to make that adjustment through the warrant language. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Priscilla.
The proposed operating budget will be the one recommended by the official budget committee. And RSA 3252 said after the hearing, no new purpose or amount can be added to the proposed budget for the warrant is posted unless the purpose of the amount was discussed and disclosed at the hearing. When we had the hearing, I was the one who made a motion. This is the motion that I made to the wording of the warrant article, and it was 6-1 carried by the budget committee, and it's been changed. The wording has been changed since that hearing. This is the approved wording that goes to the budget committee.
Okay. Anybody want to address that? Go ahead, Barbara.
The budget committee's job is to recommend or not recommend the figures. The budget committee doesn't write the warrant. The school board writes the warrant article. In addition, Senate Bill 2 has required language for the warrant article. So this is the language that Senate Bill 2 requires, and then there's an explanatory note which is permitted. But in terms of controlling the wording of the warrant, that's the school board's job, not the budget committee's.
Okay, I want to move on pretty soon here unless there's going to be another amendment made to this. Jerry, did you want to talk or do you want to defer?
No, I just wanted to mention that I had spoken to someone at DRA. I think it was Michelle Clark, and she told me today that the budget figure that's reflected in the warrant article is supposed to be only supposed to have the amount of the budget that's recommended by the budget committee. I'm sure that Attorney Roman probably has a different opinion, but I think it's a little bit unfortunate that I guess we have to turn our deliberative session into a appearance before the Supreme Court, but I guess that's the way our SAU and our superintendent want to operate this year. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Just one second, Dave, and I saw Judy's hand first. As I understand what's going on with this Article 4 is that in the past years, it wasn't being done correctly, and the $273,000 was not included, and this year, they're including it and doing it correctly, and it doesn't really change anything, because when it was being done incorrectly, it was being spent anyway. Is that pretty much it?
Correct.
Okay, so Judy,
I'd just like to know where the 273 comes from.
Judy would like to know where the 273 comes from, and I'm repeating all of your questions because Siberia. Somebody want to answer that? Yeah, Mr. Terson.
The 273 is a combination of a estimated $180,000 for Title I monies, $75,000 estimate for Title IIA, and $18,000 for what's known as Title IA Focus Priority Set Aside. That's 10% of your Title I. All three of those numbers add up to $273,000. That is our anticipated revenue for federal funds, and what we're doing is we're asking basically permission from the voters to spend those monies, which we have not done in the past, nor have we reported those monies as anticipated revenues. So we're trying to be transparent and honest with the voters to get your permission to spend those monies. Without that permission, we should not be spending those monies.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, I think we have some well-paid, well-schooled professionals at the end of the table, and most of us rely on them to keep us up to speed. We're volunteers, the rest of us sitting on this table. Some of us have got some experience, and I think maybe the longer your experience has been on this board, the more difficulty you have adjusting to this. But I know my advice is that when you hire a lawyer and you pay them, listen to them. I have no problem with what they're doing to us. They're giving us the facts. They've answered all our questions over and over again. I think it's time we move on.
Okay, Judy, you're going to be the last question, and then I'm going to move on. So go ahead.
Last year, or this year, according to grant overviews, we received $133,000 in Title I, and it's been about $60,000 average for the last 3 years for Title II. So I'm just wondering why the estimate's so high, and couldn't you solve the same purpose where you don't know what the dollar amount is by putting $1 in? Keep the line open.
Judy is questioning
Both the revenue and the expenditure side. You don't know what the number is, and your number is too high. Way too high.
direct your questions to the moderator, and Judy is questioning the $273,000 figure as being too high based upon her research. Anybody wish to address that? Mr. Tercy.
Thank you. The Title I monies, the estimate of $180,000 is based on a 5-year average. It came out to $176,000 as a 5-year average, so we rounded up to $180,000 in case we get a minimal additional amount that comes in for grant monies. And Title IIA came out to $75,000 because I looked at a 3-year average and I took the highest of the 3 years. And then the $18,000 is 10% of that $180,000. And we rounded up on the Title IIA and the Title IA just to make sure that we have a sufficient amount in there that goes in front of the voters. If it's less than what we anticipate, like $1, then we only have permission from the voters to spend $1 of federal monies.
Unless you have a public hearing.
Thank you. I would really like to move on to the next article, unless there's going to be an amendment to this article. All right, Priscilla, just because you looked at me nice.
I'll just do the title.
But you need to hold on to that microphone.
I'll just do the Title 2A.
It's right next to you, on the other side. I know you're right-handed, but come on.
I'll just do the Title 2A. 59,386, 59,742, 63,000, 62,000. That's for the last 4 years. An average of 4 years, or an average of 3 years, what he said, 58,000 over. It's not 75 for the Title 2A. It's an average of about 60. So the figures are wrong, they're high.
Okay. That was fun. So let's, we're going to move on to Article 5, but first, put on your thinking caps. And who said this? Education is hanging around until you've caught on. Education is hanging around until you've caught on. Okay, here's a hint. It's a poet. Ralph, are you?
I'm thinking about Mr. Longfellow, but.
No. Famous poet. Come on. Can't you think of a poet, writer? Sorry? Robert Frost. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, we got a stretch together. Yeah, nice. Okay, one more before we move on to 5. Any man who can safely drive, excuse me, now you said it wrong. Any man who can drive safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. Any man who drives safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. Who said that?
Romeo.
I don't think they had cars then.
Yeah, what were they driving?
What's it?
Okay. I think they call that riding, but whatever. Okay. Very smart guy said this. Come on, audience. Let's go.
Henry Ford.
Wrong. Smarter.
Smarter than Henry Ford.
That's funny.
That sounds like an answer you'd give.
Oh, no, mine would be much better. Okay, smart guy, come on. You've heard his name tonight already.
Einstein?
Yes, thank goodness. Bruce Rich gets a ticket. All right, Article 5, I'm not reading it. I'm taking advice of counsel. But what this article is about is the SAU budget. The total budget is $1,744,392, and Wakefield's share is $525,757. Is there any discussion regarding this article? Priscilla? Microphone.
RSA 194C9B, wording of the warrant article shall be as follows. Shall the voters of blank, name of the school district, adopt a school administrative unit budget of blank for the forthcoming fiscal year in which blank is assigned to the school budget of the school district. This year's adjusted budget of blank, with blank assigned to the school budget of this school district, will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of the school district voters voting in the school district unit. Now, this is the language that 94C93 says you have to use for a warrant article for the SAU.
So it's it. That's how it's read.
Okay. Any,
No, we've added stuff in there.
yeah, I don't, okay, does anybody wish to comment on that? Any other discussion regarding Article 5? Go ahead, Jerry.
I'll let Mrs. Mason go first. I've had two opportunities.
Okay, Judy Nason.
This isn't the amount that was discussed at the SAU public hearing.
This is not the amount that was discussed at the SAU public hearing, is for comment. Anybody wish to comment on that? Priscilla,
The
microphone, please. Yeah, right there, come on.
The revenues in the one that we had at the public hearing was $820,000. Mr. Tercey said $400,000 for Bright Beginnings, $400,000 for IDEA grant, and $20,000 for indirect costs. Now it's $815,000.
Okay, any other discussion? Howie?
Question, how can you change the number after a public hearing without having another public hearing?
The question is, how do you change the number without having another public hearing? So, was the number different at the public hearing than it is on the warrant?
That's what Priscilla said.
I've got it here.
Go ahead, Jerry.
The public hearing on November 19th, and the minutes reflected the grand total of the budget was $929,391.70.
Okay, and the article in the note says that that's a portion between Wakefield and Milton School District, and there's some revenues, but that figure does appear to be in at least the note. I guess I'm not understanding, so does anybody wish to, okay. Okay, this is the school, this is the warrant that you've given me, and you indicated, that the first version of the warrant, which I guess it's not signed, but shows in the first note following Article 5, the total SAU budget will be offset by revenues of $820,000, and the note in the actual warrant says $815,000. Yes, Barbara.
This is the same problem as the gross budgeting again, but I can tell you that the SAU board met again after the public hearing and voted on the correct figure. You know, you have the public hearing, you talk about all the expenditures that are anticipated, and then at some point afterward, the board votes on the final budget. So this is the final figure that was voted on by the SAU board.
Okay, any other questions? Judy?
That's not the number that was disclosed at the public hearing. But my question is, why in this warrant article can
Judy first said that that's not, hold on one second, I'm just helping out Siberia. Judy said that that's not the number that was discussed at the public hearing. Okay, go ahead.
why in Article 4 do you have to add the revenues into what you're raising, but in Article 5 you don't? Because Milton's share is less than our 525. I guess I don't understand why Article 4 wasn't written the same way, if that's what they're talking about.
Judy's questioning why the math in Article 4 is not the same as Article 5. Go ahead, Barbara.
When the SAU board adopts the SAU budget, it allocates a portion of the SAU budget to Milton and a portion to Wakefield. The allocation does not include the federal funds that the SAU board will receive. So again, the SAU board has to approve a total budget figure, which is this $1,744,392, because that's what it will cost to run the SAU for the year. Some of the money to cover that, $500,000 of it, will come from Wakefield. A similar amount will come from Milton, well, less, 300, yeah, a similar amount. And then there are offsetting revenues that go directly to the SAU. They don't go through the districts, which is why this article is written differently. So it's not a net budget amount, it's the gross budget of 1.7 million, but the only thing that Wakefield is going to pay is Wakefield's net amount, because the federal funds get paid directly to the SAU. They don't run through Wakefield's operating budget.
Okay. Any further discussion regarding Article 5? Howie?
Just a point of clarification. Years ago, I don't know how many years ago, when the town approved to have a vote shown on each money warrant article, it's confusing to me when you've got two different recommendations on the same article. I mean, the voter's not going to have a clue, because it says the school board recommends this appropriation, which is $1.7 million. And it says the budget committee recommends $929. Shouldn't they be recommending or not recommending on the same warrant article? That was our intent.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Several years ago, when the budget law was amended to require that the budget committee figure appear in the operating budget article, the Department of Revenue Administration advised school boards that the school board could include, in parentheses, as has been done here, its recommended figure, so that the voters, when they go to vote by official ballot, know that the budget that was recommended by the budget committee is either the same as or less than, probably wouldn't ever be more than, what the school board was seeking. So that's just informational. The figure that people are asked to vote on, of course, is the first figure, which is the figure that's recommended by the budget committee. But it used to be that the school board could put its figure for the operating budget in the operating budget article until that change was made in the budget law.
But yes, Howie, I agree, it's...
The budget committee's number's not on the warrant. If the warrant article for me is 744, that's not the number in the budget committee's recommendation.
Okay.
Mr. Percy?
The number that you see that the Budget Committee recommend is the number that is the 1.7 million minus the $815,000. So it's very clear that the Budget Committee was not recommending the additional $815,000 of anticipated revenue. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to show on the article the number that the Budget Committee was recommending, outside of what the SAU Joint Board was recommending. So the difference is the $815,000. And I understand it is confusing, but we wanted to make sure people saw what the board and the committee were recommending.
Well, if we got rid of SB2, then the voters could be talking about it on the floor and vote on it then. But yeah, well, there might be more. He's meant more. So, Judy, go ahead.
But the voters aren't really having a choice here, because you've included it in the default budget too. So there is no choice for the voters.
The question is, the voters don't have a choice because it's included in the default budget too.
And it's not money that was in our budget last year. I don't understand why it's in the default.
And she's questioning why it's in the default budget, because it wasn't money that was in the budget last year. Go ahead, Barbara.
Again, last year, you're talking about Article 5, the SAU budget, as I understand
I'm
it.
talking about both of them.
Okay.
Because you've included it in the default budget, there is no choice for the voters to say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't.
Well, the money is, the default budget has to include what was appropriated last year. The appropriations last year were listed in the warrant on a net basis, which is, as I have explained, against the law. This year, the default budget includes the money that came in from federal revenue because it should have been included in the appropriation amounts, if we're talking about Article 4. Article 5 is different. The SAU board determines what the SAU budget is, and the voters have the choice of either adopting the SAU board's operating budget for the SAU or the default budget for the SAU.
Yes, Priscilla?
I have two things I'd like, the names of other districts that are doing their warrant articles like this, and any RSA that deals with what you do with the anticipated funds.
RSA 32.5 is the statute that requires gross budgeting. RSA 198:20- either B or C is the statute that deals with unanticipated funds.
I want anticipated funds.
I'm sorry, what?
Anticipated funds.
RSA 32:5, where it talks about the budget including all revenues from all sources. As far as other districts that are using gross budgeting, I could send you a list. I can tell you Milton has switched over to gross budgeting because they discovered they were doing it wrong. Governor Wentworth uses gross budgeting. Guilford uses gross budgeting. Alton uses gross budgeting. Salem, Derry, Timberlane, Sanborn. In fact, I don't know of any others that are doing what you have been doing other than Milton and Wakefield. I don't think so. I don't know.
Londonderry is doing it differently.
Excuse me?
Londonderry is doing it different.
Londonderry and Timberlane do gross budgeting. It's been a requirement in the law for.
They have an article in Londonderry.
Okay, well, we're not going to have this back and forth discussion. We're talking about Article 5. Do you have a question, Mr.
I have
Kelly?
a statement. This is irrelevant to what's going on. It's not what the school district is doing. It's what we have to do to abide by the law. If the law wasn't fulfilled in previous years and wasn't caught until now, from this point on, it has to be what the law states. What you did in the past is the past. You can't, you go back to that.
Yes, Jerry.
I just reading that, and when you reading Article 5, it looks like it's kind of confusing because the part that's a portion of Wakefield is like $525,000, but it says the budget committee recommends $929,000. I mean, it's isn't it kind of going to confuse the voters here? You're going to think they're appropriating like $929,000 the way that's written at the bottom. I mean, it's just. I mean, we're not actually recommending that we, tax them that much money when it's $525,000.
Any further, yes, Dave? Microphone, please.
I'd like to ask the superintendent about that line right there, where the budget committee recommends $929,392. What can we do about that? What can we do about changing that line?
I believe you could change and just take that number out of there. However, I don't believe, based on at the public hearing, that the budget committee was recommending the appropriation in the article, which was the $1.7 million.
We usually have a budget meeting after. This is not a budget meeting, and I'm speaking as a taxpayer and voter. But after this meeting, if we conducted a budget meeting, could we change that?
Yeah, they can.
Yes. According to Barbara.
You can.
Okay, so if the budget committee meets after this meeting, which I believe is posted, we would be changing that number to what?
Yes.
I think you need to understand that what you're asked to recommend is the total budget, which is the 1.7 million. The $525,757 is what Wakefield will pay if Wakefield and Milton both vote in favor of the $1.7 million operating budget for the SAU. If either district votes that down, the SAU operating budget will be the default budget. It's a little different from your other warrant articles. So as I understand it, the 929,392 is not intended to be the budget committee recommending that that's how much Wakefield pays toward the SAU, because Wakefield's share is only $525,757. I think the 929,392 is the 1.7 million less the federal funds.
Right, well, I'm trying to avoid the confusion. If we changed it to either the 500,000 or the 1.7 million, it seems like it would jive if a voter took a hard look at this. I'm sure a lot of them are just going to vote yes or no whether we have a school system at all. But if somebody takes the time to look at these numbers, is there something we could do after the meeting that would make sense to the voters? Because that looks like an odd number. It either should be, the 500,000 or the 1.7.
That's what they could do, recommend or doesn't recommend.
Well, I guess it's up to the school board as to whether or not they change their note. The budget committee can't really do that, can they? Because it's really just an explanatory note, but maybe it needs some revision. Go ahead, Barbara.
Under the law, the budget committee and the school board can change recommendations after the meeting if articles are amended. And this article can't be amended because it's the SAU budget article, but I think to avoid confusion, if you feel that saying the budget committee recommends 929,392 is a mistake, you could just change the recommendation to recommends or doesn't recommend. Because what you're recommending is not the 525 assigned to Wakefield, it's the operating budget number itself for the SAU. That's the recommended or not recommended, and the consequences of the voters adopting that budget is that Wakefield will be paying the 525. All right?
It is confusing. Go ahead, Jerry.
I think what happened was when we were discussing this, we had a problem with the public hearing being held and the figure discussed was the $929,000, and we wanted the figures at the public hearing and on the warrant article to match, and the budget committee chose to have those figures match. And so we weren't comfortable with adopting the $1.7 million figure, and I think that was why they decided to put the $929,000 figure down on that. And part of Attorney Roman's response in a letter was that the figures should actually match between what was in the budget for the SAU and what was in the warrant article. And it was the intention and the intent of the budget committee on the SAU budget figure, and what I thought up until tonight was the budget. This is a worksheet. This isn't a budget. This is a worksheet for the budget. I learned tonight that's not an actual budget. It's a worksheet. We tried to get those figures to match. We did the same thing with the worksheet, with the warrant article language, and the SAU budget, and the warrant article language, and that's what the budget committee was trying to do, was get those figures to match. And I think that putting this figure here was trying to just get those figures to match. So what the school board and the superintendent did was the school board recommending the $1.7 million figure. They just didn't put the $1.7 million appropriation figure down that the school board recommended next to the school board recommendation, because it's actually written in the body of the language in the warrant article, if I'm not mistaken. They just chose to put the $929,000 figure next to the budget committee recommendation. I assume that's correct.
I think that's what you did, right?
Thank you, Ms. Moderator.
Moderator Dave Tibbetts, this article is very confusing to the normal, average person. I can tell you that right now. If I had to vote on now, I'd vote no.
Dave.
we're all sitting here as just voters right at the moment, but I'm going to make a recommendation that the Budget Committee convene after this meeting, and we simply remove the dollar amount and leave it with the words, Budget Committee recommends this article. If that passes the legal scrutiny.
Yes, Judy, sorry, yes.
There's one thing I forgot to ask on both these articles, 4 and 5. There's been a lot of discussion this past year by the school board of thinking about not accepting grants anymore. So I'm wondering, what happens if we raise and appropriate this money and the school board decides not to accept grants?
Comment, question is that there's been some discussion by the school board to not accept grants. And the question is, what happens if we raise and appropriate money and the school board then decides not to accept the grant that is offsetting part of what we're raising? Anybody want to answer that? I guess, go ahead, Mr. Pearson.
We have to apply for those grants every year and put an explanation into that application as to how we're going to use those monies. If for some reason there was a vote to not accept those federal grants, then we would not accept them. However, we're still required to offer those programs such as Title I. Therefore, that would something that would have to come out of the operating budget.
Which is why it's been put in the budget, right?
What has been put in the budget?
The 273?
That's correct. So that we can make sure that we have the approval of the voters to spend those monies.
But you're not, still not really giving the voters a choice about that because it's still in the default budget. So you're not asking the voters to spend it, you're telling them. You're guaranteeing federal funds.
Okay, so any more discussion regarding Article 5? Connie?
I just was wondering, if we don't get the $273,000, say we only get $200,000, then because it's in the budget and it's raised and appropriated, we have to take it out of the school board budget for that money. Is that right?
Go ahead.
If we have the 273 as anticipated revenue and we only receive $200,000, we still would only be able to spend the $200,000. However, we have permission from the voters to spend up to $273,000. Anything above the $273,000 would be considered unanticipated revenue, and therefore we'd have to have a public hearing in order to receive and spend those monies. But the $273,000 is the estimate as to what we'll receive for federal funds. Anything less than that is all we can spend. Anything more than that would be considered unanticipated, and we have to hold a public hearing in order to spend those monies.
Are we all done with Article 5? Okay, I have two quotes. Which don't really mesh too well together. The first one is, who said this? Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Yes?
Kennedy?
Nope.
Okay.
Give you a hint, it's not an American. Yes? Nope. It's not an American, and it's a male, and he's dead. Not Socrates. You all know his name because he was alive during your lifetime. He died not too long ago. Okay, think South Africa. Yes, who said that? Oh, you did back there? Yay! All right. How many tickets do we have left there, Phil? Do you know? Okay. Oh, good. Here's the other quote. Who said this? If stupidity got us into this mess, then why can't it get us out? If stupidity got us into this mess, then why can't it get us out?
I like that.
I do too. Alfred E. Newman, no. An American man, a sage of sort, lived in the past 100 years. Very good, Ralph. Ralph, you get another scratch
one.
ticket.
Good
Will
for you.
Rogers.
I'm itching to win.
Okay, so we're off to Article 6.
Starting to smell like bacon.
And I'm not going to read it. It's $50,000 for an expendable trust fund for improving security at Paul School, which needs to happen because I just walked in here tonight. No, go ahead. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know exactly where they plan to put the 50,000.
They're probably not going to tell you because then it wouldn't be very good security, but you can ask the question. So go ahead. Anybody want to answer where's the $50,000 going to go? Okay, go ahead, Priscilla.
All right,
Windows. They've been discussing it at school board meetings right along, so it's no secret.
Okay.
to that question of windows, if you put, I'm assuming you're talking bulletproof windows on the perimeter of the building. If you do that, and God forbid you have an intruder, how are you gonna get a sniper to take them out? You have no way of getting into the building to secure the situation if you have bulletproof windows. Most school invasions are just that, invasions. They are in the school, and that's where the shooting happens. They don't stand outside and shoot. They come in and they do their damage in school like a terrorist. If you have bulletproof windows, all you're doing is you're making it harder for law enforcement to do their job.
Thank you.
Dave.
The security situation has been evaluated by the local police force in conjunction with the school board. And it's exactly the kind of thing that we don't talk about at meetings when the camera's running and broadcasting all over town. Whatever they're going to do for the security, the voters and the rest of us can imagine and vote for in faith that they will spend the money wisely. They've done a lot of improvements. If you walk out of the school, you'll notice a few subtle things, but we don't like to delineate exactly what we plan to do or what we have done on public television.
Okay, any more? Yes, Judy.
Well, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I told you last year. I was on the board that originally put the first security warrant article in. There was a list of things that was supposed to be done with dollar values on that list. They were not all done. So if they didn't spend the first $100,000 they got the way they were supposed to get it, which was approved and talked over with the police and the fire, I don't believe that they talked to the police and the fire. As a matter of fact, they said they hadn't included them in the last 2 rounds of security money. So they didn't spend it the way they were supposed to the first time. I'm not voting for any more money for it spent the second time. And also, to this gentleman's point, what good are bulletproof windows if the teachers have the windows open?
Judy's questioned the failure to spend the money appropriately last budget cycle, so why should we be appropriating more money this budget cycle, and questions the bulletproof window issue. Any further questions? Yes, Siberia.
What is the balance in the expendable trust fund?
4,000, right? The balance of the trust fund for security.
In this one, yeah.
Somebody should have that answer. What is the balance in the expendable trust fund?
I don't have it.
Sorry. Or,
Well, it would be, the next 1, 2, 3 articles, have capital reserve and trust funds. And we'd like to know the balance.
okay. Go ahead, Mr. Jersey.
We had an additional $50,000 put in this year, which brings our balance to $54,943. So with this request of additional monies, to bring it up to $104,000, close to $105,000.
And just to be clear, that's for the security article?
That's correct.
Okay. So 54 is in there. Jerry?
I was wondering, is there a target for that, what you want to get that up to how much do you want to get into that fund?
Do you have a target? Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. We haven't the school board hasn't set a target. However, this additional $50,000 would cover the first phase of that project.
Okay, any further discussion regarding Article 6? Judy?
I'd like to make a motion to zero that warrant article. And I would hope that they take the $54,000 balance that they have right now and finish doing the first part of the project that was supposed to be done.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion been made by Judy Nason to zero out Article 6. It's been seconded by Priscilla. Any discussion regarding the amendment? Go ahead, Priscilla.
I had done a compilation last year, I don't have.
Microphone.
Attach it to my neck.
Yeah, good.
I did a compilation last year. I don't have it with me this year, but I know it started in 1924 of all the school shootings from that point to last year, and not one of them had ever happened with anybody shooting through windows. So I think the whole window thing, maybe we need windows, but it's not a security issue.
Okay, any further discussion regarding the amendment to Article 6? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to reduce the amount in Article 6 to 0, please indicate by raising your green cards. Okay, you can put them down. All those opposed? I'm going to have to count. So since we don't have very many people, I'm going to do it myself. So if you would put your cards down, I'll count the
We have a total of 26.
what?
We have a total of 26 voters here.
26 voters. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to reduce the balance to 0, raise your cards, please. Okay, 1, 2, 3,
Get rid of all this.
It
still gets printed. That's where it's appropriate.
10, 11, 12. Okay, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
You didn't vote.
I haven't voted. Damn it, I hate that when that happens. No, I'm going to, I'll vote in opposition to the motion. So the motion fails. But if there was a motion, a different motion, I might be in favor of voting for it. Yes?
Just comment, I just see there are 26 voters, but we have only 24, so 2 people didn't vote.
Well, I voted, that brings it up to 25, so someone abstained.
The other one, I abstained. Abstaining from 26, that makes 26.
Okay, Priscilla?
Make a motion to cut it in half this
Motion to cut it in half to 25,000. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion to cut it by 25, the amendment to cut it to by 25,000 to 25,000? Seeing, you all set? Jerry. All those in favor of the amendment to reduce Article 6 by $25,000 to $25,000, please raise your green cards, and I count them right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Are you voting for this? Yes. Did you have it up before? Okay. Let me start over. Keep it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Opposed? It's not going to be enough. But I'll count anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How can that be?
That's all the funds.
I didn't vote.
You didn't vote.
Okay, can I have the ayes again, please? Put your cards up and keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, there's 13. And I'm assuming that nays will be 12 again, because I didn't vote. So nays, raise your cards high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The motion passes by a vote of 13 to 12. The Article 6 is now at $25,000, which is the amended amount. Any further discussion regarding Article 6? There being none, I'm moving on to Article 7. And this article will raise $150,000 to put into the expendable trust fund for addition of a parking lot. Any discussion regarding this article? $150,000 parking lot. Priscilla.
I'm going to read you a chain of events about the parking lot. During the whole process, the facilities director, custodian, superintendent were continuously asking that the project be put out to bid as a complete package and not piecemeal. In fact, the superintendent back in June recommended the board go to the community during budget with a specific plan, phases, and costs, and devise a warrant article with those specifics. It was ignored. The board did not turn the money over to trustees before they spent it. They did not have a public hearing before they spent it, and they did not handle the planning board process properly. The board paid Harriman $5,000 for a conceptual plan, not an engineering plan. The board chose one of the designs, SK1. They put SK1 out to bid and received 2 bids. Their policy states 3 bids when feasible. So they put the project out to bid once more and received 3 bids. Mr. Fogg was one of the 3 bidders. Mr. Fogg thought the RFP asked the bidders to come up with their own design, even though the board had already voted to use the SK1 design. There were questions about whether Mr. Fogg, being a school board member, could bid or would this be a conflict of interest. The school board attorney assured them there was no conflict. The board chose Mr. Fogg's bid, which caused them to go out to bid once again because it was a new design. In the process of all this, they put out an RFP for tree removal and stumpage. They received 1 bid. They put it out to bid again and received 1 bid, which they rejected because the policy says 3 bids when feasible. So then they decided to put an RFP out for just tree removal. Mr. Brown asked the superintendent at the meeting if any bids had come into the SAU, and he replied no. At that point, Mr. Fogg slid an envelope containing one sheet of paper over to Mr. Brown with a bid in it. The bid process is very stringent. The bids must come to the SAU clearly marked in a sealed envelope by the given date and time, and they must follow the RFP. Email, fax, or other forms and proposals received after the closing time will not be accepted. But the board decided to ignore their own RFP, and Dale Colbath removed the trees along with Mr. Fogg. I don't know if Dale Colbath got the word, or Mr. Fogg got the word, or who got $6,000. Then Mr. Fogg decided he wasn't happy with the 14-page RFP written by their attorneys. He felt there was too much demand for information. So they sent it to the attorney. The attorney pared it down to 7 pages. At the next school board meeting, Mr. Fogg was still unhappy with some of its wording, language, and phrases, so it sounded like it was going back to the attorney once more. They put out an RFP for professional engineering services. The board decided that they wanted to open the bids themselves at a board meeting instead of having a long-time practice of opening the bids at the SAU, where a comparison sheet would be developed and presented with a recommendation at the next board meeting. This caused a 2-week delay in awarding the bid. They will not make a determination on who will get the bid until tomorrow night, rather than choosing an engineer for a few weeks ago, so that perhaps some kind of possible plan could have been presented. They still have, right now, $75,000 in the fund to hire an engineer, complete some of the groundwork, and come up with a cohesive plan to present to all of us next year. I say we wait until next year till they have all their ducks in a row.
Thank you. Any further discussion regarding Article 7? Dave?
I am not on the school board, and I wasn't at all those meetings. I've watched some of them on tape on the channel, and I think that the system got all mucked up last year, probably because the school board member was involved in both ends of the project, bidding and school board decisions. And I think that's a bad practice all the way around. I think things have been straightened out a little bit, and I hate to see no progress made in the next year, because if we have enough money to do a plan. Maybe that's enough to accomplish this year. But it's going to be 2016 before we see anything really done in the way of work on this parking lot at the rate we're going, and that's a darn shame, because it would be really nice not to waste the next season through the fall, particularly the summer when the kids are not in school, to get some work done. I guess I would vote for this on the faith that they could get their ducks in a row and get it moving. We do need some technical expertise. I think the only one in the room that was really cognizant of what's involved in these type of projects of this scale was our superintendent. He's made good recommendations. Personally, I've been involved in building some libraries and schools in Massachusetts. They're at the stage right now of having a conceptual sketch, not professionally drawn, just a conceptual sketch. So there's a lot to be done in terms of getting a plan, then engineering drawings to be bid, and then construction drawings. So we're really at step one with that project, but I'd really like to see it move forward and not have to wait until 2016 to have some work done on it. So it was a split decision on the budget committee. Some of us were in favor of putting the money in for this year. Some of us were in the favor of not giving them any money at all.
So it says the budget committee does not recommend.
The vote, I think, was 3-3-3.
It was 3-5.
What they did, combining, I was there at the vote. It was 3 yes, 3 no, and 3 abstain.
Okay, that's the library you think about. That's the Gaffney Library.
This was 3-5.
Okay, so, Article 7, any more discussion? I see Judy.
I'm not sure if the $150,000 is going to be enough to finish the project this year anyways. It would make sense to me to get an actual engineer plan, go to the planning board, do the planning board process, and know what, put it out to bid, and know what we're going to get for money. Now we've got last year's money sitting in the bank, we're gonna have more money sitting in the bank. We still don't know how much it's gonna cost, and it's probably not gonna get done this year anyways. So I'd make a motion to, cut that in half, so that at least we're putting something towards it, like a capital reserve. And once we know what the final amount's going to be, that we raise and appropriate that next year and do the project. But I think they're just taking a guess in the wind that $150,000 is gonna finish it.
The motion is to reduce Article 7 by $75,000 so that it will read $75,000.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Dave Mankus. Is there any further discussion regarding the amendment? Mr. Knight?
Well, I just want to know what the balance is in the trust currently. 75.
There's $75,000 in the expendable trust fund right now, give or take?
Yes, 74 and 937 December.
Okay, that's close, yep. All right, so there's 75 grand in there now. The motion is to essentially raise another 75 grand if this article passes in March. Any further discussion regarding this amendment? Okay, get your little green cards ready. All those in favor of the amendment to reduce Article 7 from 150,000 to 75,000, please raise your card. Seems like a lot. Okay, put your cards down. All those opposed? That's definitely a lot less. The motion carries. And therefore, Article 7 now reads 75,000 instead of 150,000. Any further discussion regarding the amended Article 7? I see none. Therefore, I'm going to move on. How many tickets do we have left, Phil? 3. 3, okay. So who said this? Always be a first-rate version of yourself instead of a second-rate version of somebody else. Always be a first-rate version of yourself instead of a second-rate version of somebody else. Well, I did just say it. Probably no one's going to get this, so I'm going to give you some hints. Said by an actress, an American actress. She's dead.
Betty Davis.
Who?
Betty Davis.
No, but that's... Who?
Laura McCall.
Nope. Yes. Nope, not Audrey Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn, no. Okay, this will give it away. Who, what'd you say? Liz Taylor, no. Somewhere. Who's first?
That's a precious too.
Who was first? Raise your hand. I couldn't hear you. Okay, yay! Okay, so we're on to Article 8. This is 42 grand, capital reserve, roof repair and replacement. Any discussion? Article 8, 42 grand, capital reserve, roof repair and replacement. Oh, Siberia has 2. Yes.
What's in the reserve?
Oh, what's in the reserve? So 103,000. Howie Knight.
What's left to do that we need another 42,000?
What's left to do? Yes.
What we've done is we've set out RFPs and we've developed a 5-year plan to
5-year plan.
It's a 5-year.
Any further discussion regarding Article 8? Okay, I see none, so I'm going to move along to Article 9. And this is see if the school district will accept the recommendation of the SAU 64 Withdrawal Study Committee and not withdraw from the SAU. Go ahead, Bob.
What we're doing on this article, if we look at this article,
Microphone, please.
Yes, that's a good idea.
I'd just like everyone to know that when it was approved last year to look into the SAU withdrawal, we had a withdrawal committee put together, and we had, based on what was going on, it was a reaction to Milton wanting to withdraw from us. After that withdrawal committee decided to not withdraw from the SAU, we went on to look more fiscally into it and at this, and had decided where we're on two educational paths going in separate directions, that it would be in the best interest of Wakefield and a money-saving option to withdraw from the SAU at this point in time. So if you look, we're not recommending the article because we would really like to move forward with the withdrawal.
Any further discussion regarding Article 9? Priscilla.
Totally support this.
What? Microphone, Priscilla, come on.
I totally support the board in this. I think they're doing the right thing. Like Bonnie said, we're going in totally different directions, and I think local control would be a big step in the right direction.
Any? Yes, not you, Judy. This is Rich.
I think here again, we're putting the cart before the horse. There's a lot of things in this budget, look at the default, that are bottom line zeros. Where's it gonna be held? Where are they gonna get supplies from? Until they come back with the more complete one. I don't see how, I would vote to support this amendment to not withdraw until they have a clearer plan.
Thank you. Judy.
I was just gonna ask someone to explain the process about the planning. There has to be, I believe, a planning committee and so forth that has to be developed to move forward with this. If someone could explain that.
Judy wants the process explained to withdraw. Go ahead, Mike.
Process would be if this article fails this March, then you have to form a new planning committee, and that planning committee has a year to put together a plan for withdrawal that would be presented to the State Board of Education for their approval, and then it would go on, the plan would go on the ballot in March of 2016 for the voters to approve. If the voters approve that plan in March of 2016, then you would become your own SAU as of July 1st, 2016. If this article was to pass, then you would have to wait for 2 years in order to put another article on the ballot to form a withdrawal study committee.
Yes, Judy?
So that's when you would have all your numbers and the voters would have a choice of whether to either withdraw or not withdraw, correct?
Correct.
So this is just like a step in the process. I would fully support it and ask that people vote no on this article so that we could move forward and see if this would be a viable option for the school district.
Judy wishes people to vote no on Article 9. Yes, go ahead.
If both the school board and budget committee don't want to agree with it, why is this article in here?
I think it's part of the process, but go ahead, Mike.
You're required to put the withdrawal study committee's recommendation on the ballot, and we did not have that in time for last year's ballot. That's why it's on this year's ballot.
Any further discussion regarding Article 9? Jerry?
Yeah, I agree with the school board on this too, and I think it'd be a great idea if we could form a committee and look into forming our own SAU. I think it'd be a lot more cost effective for us, and we bring our control of the school back to right back to town, and it would make the budgeting process a lot easier for us. And I think it would save us a lot of work, because basically a lot of our high school work is taken care of by Spalding, because we have all of those students out of district. We basically just have to take care of the Paul School, and we have quite a able staff here to run the Paul School for us. And I think we spend a lot of money through the current system that we really don't have to spend. So I would really encourage everybody to vote against this and form a committee to look into getting the SAU of our own, and kind of move away from SAU 64. Get my numbers messed up. Thank you.
Any further discussion regarding Article 9? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, was that your motion? Or did you have something else you wanted to talk about? Okay, go ahead.
On the school budget, on this one for 2015, I noticed there's only 3 members of the budget committee that have signed it. 2/3 did not approve it. I was just wondering from the budget committee if they can explain to the voters here why they did not recommend this budget.
Okay. Question is why the budget was not recommended.
That was on the MS 27 bill. I didn't sign that myself because I didn't really have that much confidence in the SAU or the school board to put my signature on that. That can be signed by either a majority of the school board or the budget committee before it gets sent to DRA. So I just myself didn't feel comfortable signing that.
Go ahead, then.
I think it's a matter of who got down there before they copied this.
Okay. Go ahead, Connie.
I don't feel confident in signing
What does this represent then? This budget? Nothing? MS 27 is what? What does this represent?
Well, Attorney Loman could probably explain it to you. That's the form that gets sent to the Department of Revenue Administration.
So nobody from the budget really committee has to sign this? It's not recommended?
It can be signed by a majority of the budget committee members or the school board before it gets sent to Concord. And I think that by RSA, I think that what has to get sent to Concord by the budget committee is after the final meeting, which is the vote that's taken in March. And that recommendation by the legislative body of the voters is what the budget committee is required to send to Concord. And I'm sure that Attorney Roman would probably be able to explain that better than I could.
You're earning your money tonight, Barbara.
I certainly am. And my scratch ticket. Don't forget the scratch ticket.
Oh, that's right.
Well, the important thing about the MS 27 is that it gets posted with the warrant. And sometimes it has all the signatures, sometimes it doesn't. I wouldn't worry about the lack of signatures. The main thing is that it was posted. What DRA will want when it's time to set the tax rate is the appropriations actually approved by the voters. And that's the form I think that he's talking about. Okay?
Okay. Any further discussion regarding 9 or anything else? Are we all set to go? Do you have a question? Point of order, go ahead. Well, I wasn't really in my rules of order, but you can overrule me as a board, but forget it. We're going to go to a motion to adjourn. Okay. All those in favor of leaving and going home, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Yes. Would you bring your green cards and your stuff back to Siberia? Thank you very much.
Recommendation.